Hi everybody. This video is intended to give you some tips on using the image map chip material. I won't try to break down the entire structure of the material. It's rather complex, but this will point you to some key components and elements that should be enough to get you started and get it working for your particular model or situation. This material uses an image map to drive channels of some of Modo's procedural textures. Which gives you a lot of artistic control while still tapping into the power of procedurals. This method is possible thanks to the nodal shader features added in Modo 801, so 801 is required to use this material. So basically, the lighter values in the image create more chipping. White areas will have no paint and black areas will be undamaged. And, of course, the interesting stuff happens along the gray values in between black and white. Gradient layers that convert those image values to texture channel values are key to controlling the material. This grout bevel gradient controls the width of the cracks and the bump bevel along the edges of the paint. In the shader tree, we see that the gradient's input comes from driver A, which is driven by the image map. In the schematic, the output value of that gradient layer feeds into various channels of the paving procedural texture. Notice that in the image map, I've set its low value to 0.03. That means that by default, there will be some minimal cracking even in the black areas of the image map. That can be overridden, as we'll see in a moment, but I thought this was a more natural looking default state. So when we edit the gradient curve, we would need to increase the starting input value a bit if we wanted to eliminate all cracks from the solid paint areas. Moving the second point on the curve, moving it to the right, decreases the rate at which cracks widen. It's a bit subtle, but if we toggle between the two curves, we see that the steeper curve translates into more quickly widening cracks. Naturally, you can edit this curve any way you like to vary that transition along the gradient. This next gradient controls chip distribution. In other words, which gray values result in paint removal. Lowering the starting value will cause paint to flake away even where the image is black. Raising the ending value will result in some paint remaining even where the image is white. Note here that there are two flavors of chipping, fracture and craquelure. Only one should be enabled at a time. They're both based on Modo's paving procedural, just with some different settings. And a great deal of variety can be had by playing with those paving settings. And it's too much to get into in this video. Maybe I'll have a chance to talk about that at some future time. I'd also note that there are two copies of the paving procedural in each of those chip flavors. The upper copy is applied with the multiply blend mode. That way it overlays and breaks up the paving patterns and makes them more chaotic, less like paving, really. So here's a quick look at some of the other material layers. Just above the chips group, we have gradients that convert the result of the chips layer into diffuse color and bump layers. The paving procedurals output to driver B, which serves as input to both of those gradients. Above that, we have the paint metal split group. There, the same driver B input is used to distinguish paint from metal in the diffuse, specular, and reflection channels. And finally above that we have the stain group. It also uses the image map's driver A output, in this case to control the settings of a Modo's crumpled procedural, which in turn alters roughness and diffuse color settings to make the surfaces a bit dirty. Since it's based on the image map, there tends to be more grime in the general vicinity of the cracks. Okay, now a note on scaling the material. This is done, as usual, using the texture locators associated with each of the procedural textures. For convenience, I've linked up all of those locators, the scale of all of those locators, to one in the Crack Lure's paving texture, the locator named Master Paving Scale. Looking at the schematic, we see that the X channel of that locator, the X scaling channel of that locator, controls the scale of all other relevant textures. Editing that one channel effectively scales the entire material. That includes scaling both chipping flavors, both paving procedurals within those flavors, and the stain layer as well. All right, that's about it for this video. Please see the provided links and notes for more info, and contact me on the forums if you have any questions.